They used to think Freemasonry was merely a relic of medieval stone workers, but actually it transformed into a powerful brotherhood with revolutionary connections and symbols hidden in plain sight. This narrative delves into how the first Grand Lodge emerged amidst rival factions, how monarchs opposed the craft and the schisms that divided them along national lines. We explore their colonial adaptations, wartime survival, and the modern challenges of digital age adaptation and New World Order allegations that keep their mysteries alive. The stoneworkers of Europe emerged in the 12th century as powerful guilds of cathedral builders. These craftsmen possessed revolutionary architectural knowledge, which they guarded with immense secrecy. According to official guild records from England, members swore oaths never to reveal their construction techniques. They developed a complex system of coded language and hand signals to communicate on site, effectively creating a closed professional circle. This protected their trade from outsiders and ensured their exclusive employment on Europe's grandest projects. Independent researchers have discovered that these practical protections evolved into symbolic rituals. Scottish guild ledgers from the 13th century detail elaborate initiation ceremonies for new apprentices. These rites allegedly involved moral lessons taught through the tools of their trade: the square, the compass, and the level. However, facts indicate these ceremonies served a dual purpose. They bonded members through shared experience while simultaneously vetting their loyalty. The true reason for such secrecy, some suggest, was not just protecting a livelihood but cultivating an elite brotherhood. Strangely, the transition from operative stonemasonry to a purely philosophical society remains poorly documented. Declassified documents from old guild halls show a gradual shift in the 17th century. The tools and symbols retained their names, but their meanings transformed entirely. What began as a method to build cathedrals of stone ultimately laid the foundation for an entirely different kind of institution, one that would influence history for centuries to come. This evolution from practical craft to philosophical institution would soon face its greatest challenge as the 17th century gave way to the 18th. The 16th century witnessed a profound transformation. As the great cathedral building projects declined across Europe, the operative masons' lodges faced an existential crisis. Their practical work was diminishing, yet a remarkable shift began within these fraternities. They started accepting non-working members, gentlemen and intellectuals who had never held a trowel. This was the crucial first step from a craft guild to a philosophical brotherhood. The tools of the trade were repurposed. The square and compasses were no longer just instruments for shaping stone. They became powerful symbols for shaping moral character, teaching lessons of integrity, truth, and self-improvement. The working tools became a symbolic blueprint for a virtuous life. The first documented evidence of this new, speculative form of masonry emerged from Scotland. The Lodge of Edinburgh, No. 1, possesses records that are particularly telling. Its minutes from the year 1691 show the initiation of non-operatives. These were not stonemasons but influential figures from other professions. Independent researchers analyzing these old manuscripts have noted a strange pattern. The transition was not officially declared. Authorities of the time claimed these were merely social gatherings. However, the facts indicate a deeper, more structured purpose was developing behind closed doors. The rituals once used to protect trade secrets were evolving into allegorical plays. This period remains shrouded in deliberate silence. Why did the operative masons so readily share their ancient secrets with outsiders? The official version suggests it was a simple matter of survival for the lodges, yet declassified documents from private archives reveal a more complex picture. The non-operatives brought new ideas, philosophical concepts from the Renaissance and scientific revolution. The lodge became a unique forum. It was a place where a stonemason and a scholar could meet as equals. They built not with limestone, but with ideas. The true foundation of modern Freemasonry was laid not in the bright light of a quarry, but in the shadowy transition from a practical craft to a speculative brotherhood. The tools remained the same, but their purpose was forever altered. And so this newly forged brotherhood began to organize, its abstract ideals seeking a tangible form in the real world. The year was 1717. London simmered with political intrigue following the Hanoverian succession. In this climate of shifting power, 4 independent lodges made a fateful decision. They gathered at the Goose and Gridiron Ale House. Their goal was to form a central governing body. This was the birth of the premier Grand Lodge of England. Official records present this as a simple administrative consolidation. Yet, the timing raises profound questions. Why then? The new Protestant monarchy needed stabilizing influences. A unified fraternity could serve as a powerful behind-the-scenes network. Anthony Sayer was elected the first Grand Master. He was a gentleman, not an operative stonemason. This signaled a dramatic shift in the organization's character. His role, however, was largely ceremonial. The true architect was Reverend James Anderson. He was commissioned to draft the constitutions. This document, published in 1723, was revolutionary. It provided a historical narrative and a set of governing laws. Authorities claimed it was merely to standardize rituals, but independent researchers have uncovered a deeper purpose. The constitutions effectively erased the Guild's Catholic past. They crafted a new, politically acceptable history for a Protestant nation. The union of the four lodges was portrayed as a voluntary act. However, facts suggest a more calculated maneuver. The lodges involved were not the oldest or most prestigious. Strangely, more established groups initially resisted the centralization. The creation of the Grand Lodge created an immediate schism. It claimed authority over all English Freemasonry. This was a power grab disguised as brotherly unity. The true motive may have been control. By uniting under a single banner, these men did not just form a club. They built an institution whose hidden influence would soon span the globe. The quiet meeting in a London pub had unleashed a force that history is still deciphering. But could such a powerful, globe-spanning institution truly maintain its unity? The formation of the first Grand Lodge did not bring unity. Instead, it ignited a century of internal strife. By the 1730s, a deep schism fractured English Freemasonry. Two rival Grand Lodges emerged, locked in a bitter struggle for legitimacy. The original body, now labeled the Moderns, faced a formidable challenger. This new group defiantly called itself the Ancients, claiming to represent a purer, older tradition. The ancient-modern controversy was far more than a simple dispute over rituals. According to official records, the conflict centered on ceremonial innovations. The Moderns had allegedly streamlined older practices. However, declassified lodge minutes reveal the Ancients vehemently rejected these changes. They accused the Moderns of abandoning the craft's true essence. The differences were profound, encompassing prayer forms, symbolic floor designs, and even the placement of certain officers during ceremonies. These were not minor technicalities but fundamental disagreements over Masonic identity. This institutional rift mirrored the era's profound social tensions. The Moderns often attracted the aristocracy and wealthy merchant classes. In contrast, independent researchers note the Ancients drew membership from artisans, shopkeepers, and recent Irish immigrants. The Masonic conflict thus reflected the wider class and ethnic fissures within 18th century society. Paradoxically, this very division fueled the fraternity's expansion. Competing lodges aggressively established new outposts across Europe and the American colonies, each seeking to outmaneuver the other. The rivalry, while deeply divisive, inadvertently became a powerful engine for spreading Masonic influence to new frontiers. Yet even as these competing branches spread across continents, their shared heritage remained rooted in a single foundational craft. Architecture served as the central allegory for Freemasonry's moral teachings. The square and compasses, tools from medieval stonemasonry, evolved into profound philosophical symbols. The square came to represent morality and virtuous conduct, reminding each member to act fairly toward others. The compasses symbolized self-restraint and the ability to circumscribe one's desires within proper bounds. According to early ritual manuals like the Regis Poem from the 14th century, these tools were integral to the initiation ceremonies, teaching ethical lessons from the very beginning. The two great pillars, often named Bors and Jachin, held significant meaning. They were said to represent strength and establishment, drawing from a biblical narrative. Independent researchers have noted that their descriptions in Masonic lectures remained remarkably consistent across different jurisdictions in the 18th century. This consistency suggested a highly organized system of symbolic instruction, even as the fraternity spread globally. However, facts indicate that the exact interpretation of certain architectural elements, like the checkered floor, sometimes varied between lodges, revealing a degree of local adaptation within a universal framework. The transformation from practical implements to philosophical metaphors was a deliberate process. Early, speculative Masons in the 17th and 18th centuries adopted the working tools of their operative predecessors, assigning them spiritual meanings. The gavel, for instance, symbolized the necessity to knock off one's vices and superfluities. According to official data from Grand Lodge archives, this symbolic system was fully codified by the 1720s. The true purpose of this architectural allegory was to provide a universal, non-dogmatic language for teaching ethics, a system that has been maintained for centuries. But how exactly did this symbolic language translate into the actual experience of becoming a Freemason? The initiation journey through Freemasonry's 3 degrees has remained remarkably consistent since the 18th century. According to official records, the first step transforms a candidate into an entered apprentice. This ceremony, documented in exposures like Masonry Dissected from 1730, involved symbolic blindfolding and a series of solemn obligations. The ritual was designed to represent a spiritual birth into a new life of moral and intellectual pursuit. Advancement to the fellow craft degree marked a significant evolution. Independent researchers have noted how this stage directly borrowed from medieval guild practices, where journeymen demonstrated their growing skill. However, the Masons transformed physical labor into a metaphor for mental and philosophical development. The working tools of the operative Mason became symbols for cultivating one's mind. This clever adaptation showed a clear shift from purely trade-based traditions toward the Enlightenment's focus on reason and self-improvement. The culmination, the Master Mason degree, holds the most profound and controversial secrets. The central allegory, the building of King Solomon's temple, is universally acknowledged. Yet facts indicate a strange divergence between early and modern interpretations. 18th century exposures described a ceremony far more visceral and dramatic. One text from 1760 stated the ritual was designed to impress upon the mind the shadow of death. Modern lodge practices have softened some elements, but the core symbolism of loss, resilience, and ultimate renewal remains. This progression from practical guilds to a system of moral allegory perfectly encapsulates the Brotherhood's enduring and often misunderstood legacy. But this profound spiritual legacy would soon face its greatest challenge from the highest seats of temporal power. The first official condemnation arrived in 1738. Pope Clement XII issued the papal bull, In Eminenti, formally banning Catholic participation in Freemasonry. Authorities claimed the secretive nature of the lodges fostered conspiracies against both church and state. However, independent researchers have noted the timing coincided with the craft's growing intellectual influence, which directly challenged papal authority. This pattern of suppression quickly spread across Catholic Europe, from Spain to the Italian states, where monarchs enforced the papal decree with their own edicts. They publicly denounced the fraternity's alleged moral perversions. The 19th century saw this opposition intensify. Pope Pius IX famously labeled Freemasonry as the synagogue of Satan in the mid-1800s. According to official data, the primary reason remained the organization's secrecy and perceived anti-clericalism. Yet declassified documents from the Vatican secret archive suggest a deeper political fear. Masonic ideals of liberty and enlightenment directly threatened the absolute power of monarchies allied with the Church. In Portugal, the Marquis of Pombal expelled the Jesuits, but simultaneously suppressed the lodges, a contradictory move that historians argue was purely about controlling all centers of power. The 20th century witnessed the most brutal persecutions, where the stated reasons shifted entirely to political paranoia. The Nazi regime outlawed Freemasonry in the 1930s, branding it a Jewish conspiracy. Simultaneously, the Soviet Union violently suppressed lodges, accusing them of bourgeois idealism and internationalist ties. Both totalitarian systems, despite their ideological opposition, used identical tactics. They confiscated property, imprisoned members, and dissolved all chapters. The official reason was always national security and ideological purity. However, facts indicate the true target was any independent association where free thought could flourish. The KGB archives later revealed extensive surveillance operations aimed not at uncovering crimes, but at preemptively crushing a potential network of dissent. The craft's enduring struggle was not against religion or state, but against any system demanding absolute conformity. This historical pattern of suppressing independent thought finds striking parallels in how secret societies would later influence revolutionary movements. The revolutionary connections between Freemasonry and the great 18th century upheavals present a historical labyrinth. Official records from both America and France meticulously document the membership of pivotal figures. Benjamin Franklin, initiated in Philadelphia in the 1730s, rose to become the Grand Master of Pennsylvania. Across the Atlantic, the Marquis de Lafayette, a prominent French Mason, forged a crucial alliance with the American cause. These were not isolated memberships but nodes in a vast, transnational network. Independent researchers have long questioned the coincidence of Masonic participation in two simultaneous revolutions. Declassified correspondence from French lodges reveals discussions of Enlightenment ideals that directly challenged monarchical power. The phrase liberty, equality, fraternity, the very motto of the French Revolution, echoed core Masonic principles. Historical archives show that Franklin and Lafayette utilized Masonic channels for clandestine communication, bypassing official state censors. This network allegedly facilitated the flow of funds, political tracts, and military strategies across the Atlantic. However, facts indicate a more complex reality than a simple conspiracy. While many revolutionary leaders were Freemasons, the institution itself never issued a unified call to arms. Authorities in both nations consistently claimed the lodges were merely philosophical societies. The British government in the 1770s actively spied on colonial lodges, suspecting them of sedition. The true reason for this surveillance remains debated. According to the archives of the French Grand Orient, internal divisions were profound. Many aristocratic Masons remained loyal to the crown and were ultimately guillotined. The documented involvement is undeniable, but the extent of a coordinated plot continues to be a subject of intense scholarly investigation, separating verifiable history from enduring myth. While these internal European conflicts were unfolding, the Brotherhood was simultaneously establishing itself across oceans and continents through imperial expansion. The colonial expansion of European powers fundamentally transformed Freemasonry's geographic footprint. British, French, and Spanish empires carried its lodges across the globe throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Military regiments and colonial administrators established these outposts. They served as familiar social anchors for expatriates in foreign lands. This network facilitated a unique cultural exchange. However, the institution faced a complex challenge. It needed to maintain its core principles while adapting to profoundly different societies. In British India, lodges initially excluded native elites. Yet, by the early 19th century, some Indian princes were initiated. They navigated a system steeped in Western symbolism. African lodges, particularly those in West Africa, presented another adaptation. Here, Freemasonry sometimes merged with local secret society traditions. This created a hybrid form of fellowship that authorities struggled to categorize. The American colonies witnessed perhaps the most significant transformation. Lodges became hotbeds of revolutionary sentiment, contrary to their European origins. Figures like George Washington were prominent members. This demonstrated a stark divergence from the loyalist stance of their mother Grand Lodges. According to official correspondence from the period, European leaders expressed deep concern over this ideological shift. Yet, the American lodges flourished, embedding themselves into the new nation's fabric. The global spread was not a monolithic process, but a series of intricate negotiations between a universalist ideal and local realities. Yet this very success in adapting to local context would soon expose the fragility of the movement's international cohesion. Nationalism fractured Freemasonry's universalist facade. As the 18th century waned, the Brotherhood's international unity shattered along new political borders. Official histories from Grand Lodges often portrayed these splits as mere administrative reorganizations. However, declassified correspondence reveals deeper ideological rifts. The American and French revolutions, in particular, forced Masons to choose between Enlightenment ideals and national allegiance. This divergence created irreconcilable traditions that persist to this day. In the newly formed United States, racial segregation produced a profound schism. In 1775, a man named Prince Hall and 14 other free black men were initiated into a British military lodge. They later formed African Lodge No. 459, the foundation of Prince Hall Masonry. White American lodges, according to their public statements, refused to recognize them, citing spurious territorial jurisdiction. Yet facts indicate the true cause was the pervasive racism of the era. Prince Hall Masonry thus became a parallel fraternity, a sanctuary for African Americans seeking dignity and community within the Masonic framework, yet entirely separate from it. Across the Atlantic, the Grand Orient de France made a radical break in 1877. It removed the requirement for members to believe in a supreme being and the immortality of the soul. Authorities within the Grand Orient argued this was a necessary modernization for a secular republic. This act, however, provoked immediate condemnation from the United Grand Lodge of England and most other Anglo-American jurisdictions. They severed all relations, declaring the French obedience irregular. Independent researchers note this was not merely a theological dispute. It reflected a fundamental clash between continental secularism and Anglo-American religious traditionalism. The Masonic world was now cleaved in two. a silent schism echoing the louder political divisions of the modern world. This ideological divide would soon be tested by far more immediate dangers, as the very survival of these organizations came under threat from totalitarian regimes. In the shadow of the Nazi regime and later under communist rule, Masonic lodges faced existential threats. Official state narratives branded them as enemies, forcing a complete retreat into secrecy. According to declassified Stasi files, surveillance was relentless, with informants planted to dismantle the brotherhood from within. Lodges did not simply vanish, they transformed. Members communicated through complex cipher systems and met in basements or remote forests under the guise of innocuous social gatherings. The true purpose of these meetings was concealed behind layers of coded language and secret handshakes, a direct survival strategy against state persecution. Declassified KGB archives reveal a staggering scope of operations against Masonic groups, particularly after World War II. One file details how agents meticulously tracked a single member for over 3 years. However, facts indicate the Brotherhood's resilience was profoundly underestimated. Independent researchers have discovered that despite the immense pressure, core philosophical teachings were preserved orally when written records were too dangerous. Secret meetings were not merely social, they were strategic planning sessions for preserving the fraternity's very soul. The authorities claimed total control, yet the lodges persisted, their activities hidden in plain sight. The post-war reconstruction of European Masonry was a clandestine triumph. In the years following 1945, surviving members slowly began to reconnect, using old, trusted networks to verify identities. This painstaking process took more than a decade in many Eastern Bloc nations. Declassified documents show that state security agencies were aware of this revival but strangely failed to completely suppress it. The true cause of their survival was an unbreakable commitment to their ideals. From the ashes of persecution, the Brotherhood meticulously rebuilt its lodges, proving that an idea once rooted in secrecy and solidarity could outlast any tyranny. Yet this remarkable resilience stands in stark contrast to the challenges that would emerge just a few decades later. The dramatic membership decline in mainstream Freemasonry since the 1960s presents a complex puzzle. According to official data from various North American Grand Lodges, memberships plummeted by over 60% between the late 1960s and the turn of the millennium. This was not a gradual decrease but a steep, sustained drop that caught many established lodges by surprise. Sociologists point to a fundamental shift in social patterns as a primary driver. The post-war era of community-centric belonging gave way to more individualistic and family-oriented leisure activities. Men were no longer joining the same types of fraternal organizations that their fathers had. However, independent researchers have uncovered deeper layers to this phenomenon. They argue that Freemasonry faced unprecedented competition from a burgeoning landscape of special interest groups, from professional networking associations to new spiritual movements. These alternatives offered more immediate, tangible benefits compared to the traditional, ritual-heavy path of Masonic advancement. Furthermore, declassified internal communications from one Grand Lodge archive reveal a growing concern, expressed as early as 1972, about an image problem. The organization was increasingly perceived by younger generations as anachronistic and secretive in an age demanding transparency. The facts, however, indicate a confluence of factors rather than a single cause. Strangely, while mainstream lodges struggled, some smaller, more esoteric or research-oriented Masonic bodies saw stable, or even slightly growing memberships. This discrepancy suggests the decline was not universal but targeted. The true cause appears to be a perfect storm of social change, increased competition for time, and a failure by the institution to effectively modernize its appeal without sacrificing its core traditions. The mystery is not in the decline itself, but in the varied pace and selectivity of its impact across the Masonic world. Yet this very selectivity in the decline's pattern reveals a potential path forward, one that requires a fundamental shift in how the institution connects with a new generation. Freemasonry has entered its most transformative era since the 18th century. Lodges worldwide have adopted digital tools to counter declining membership. According to official data from the United Grand Lodge of England, over 200 lodges now maintain active social media profiles. They have streamed ritual ceremonies for remote members, a practice unthinkable just 2 decades ago. Yet independent researchers discovered these online efforts have sparked intense internal debate. Traditionalists argue this modernization dilutes the fraternity's core principles. They point to secret handshakes and closed-door initiations, fearing digital exposure destroys their esoteric value. One elder member stated, "The mystery cannot survive in the open." However, facts indicate that lodges in North America have successfully recruited thousands of younger members through modernized outreach. A lodge in California reported a membership increase of 40% after launching a podcast exploring Masonic history and philosophy. Strange inconsistencies emerged between public-facing modernity and private tradition. While websites promised transparency, internal communications, according to leaked forum archives, revealed deep concerns over preserving ritual integrity. Lodges in Europe began hosting hybrid meetings, allowing online participation while conducting physical initiations. This dual approach has become the new norm, balancing ancient rites with digital necessity. The true challenge remains reconciling 800 years of history with the relentless pace of the 21st century. But how does this ancient institution reconcile its public-facing activities with its famously private nature? The Freemasons have long navigated a delicate equilibrium between their celebrated philanthropic endeavors and their deeply ingrained culture of secrecy. According to official data, their charitable contributions are staggering. For instance, records from the United Grand Lodge of England show donations exceeding $150 million to various hospitals and educational institutions in the past 2 decades alone. This public generosity, however, operates in the shadow of private rituals and guarded membership requirements. Prospective members undergo a vetting process shrouded in discretion, a practice that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. This dual nature fuels a perpetual cycle of public appreciation and intense suspicion. While communities benefit from new hospital wings and scholarship funds, independent researchers have uncovered a contrasting narrative: classified documents from various national archives, including files from the FBI, reveal intense governmental scrutiny of the Brotherhood's closed-door activities throughout the 20th century. The very secrecy that protects their traditions strangely fuels conspiracy theories. How can an organization that gives so much also hide so much? Authorities have consistently claimed these are merely fraternal ceremonies, yet facts point to a persistent pattern of public mistrust. The tension is palpable. In one documented case from 1998, a multi-million-dollar donation to a children's hospital was announced publicly with great fanfare. Yet the internal deliberations leading to that decision remained entirely confidential, accessible only to members of a certain high degree. This dichotomy is the cornerstone of the Masonic identity. They have built a public legacy on the foundation of charity, all while carefully guarding the keystone of their private world. The balance is precarious, a high-wire act between societal contribution and self-preservation that continues to define their relationship with the outside world. Yet this carefully maintained public image would soon face its most formidable challenge, as the very secrecy that protected their traditions began fueling far darker interpretations of their intentions. The whispers began in the 18th century. Pamphlets in France and Britain alleged that Freemasons, operating from their secret lodges, plotted to overthrow monarchies and religions. This foundational anti-Masonic propaganda claimed the Brotherhood's true goal was a covert global takeover. The narrative lay dormant for decades, only to resurface with explosive force in the 20th century. Conspiracy theorists then wove Freemasonry into a vast web they called the New World Order. They pointed to symbols on the United States dollar bill and alleged that influential Masons in governments worldwide were systematically dismantling national sovereignty. According to these theories, every major war and economic collapse was a calculated move in their centuries-long game. Independent researchers have since scoured declassified documents, particularly from intelligence archives, searching for a proverbial smoking gun. They highlight figures like President Harry S. This, they argue, was not a coincidence but a deliberate step toward a one-world government. The narrative gained immense traction on early internet forums in the 1990s, where users connected disparate events into a single, sinister framework. They claimed the Brotherhood had infiltrated every major bank and corporation, pulling the strings of global finance from the shadows. However, verifiable facts present a far more fragmented picture. While numerous prominent politicians and businessmen, from Winston Churchill to Henry Ford, were indeed Freemasons, documented evidence of a coordinated political agenda remains entirely absent. Scholars note that the fraternity's official focus has always been on philanthropy, moral development, and fellowship. The central allegation of a unified conspiracy is contradicted by the organization's own internal diversity and frequent disagreements on public matters. The true power of the New World Order theory lies not in its factual accuracy, but in its enduring ability to provide a simple, albeit unproven, explanation for the world's complex and often chaotic events. The secret society makes for a compelling villain, yet the evidence for its global dominion remains a phantom in the archives. Yet if we shift our focus from these grand, shadowy narratives to the tangible artifacts of our daily lives, we find that the evidence for such conspiracies is often said to be hiding in plain sight. The American $1 bill has long fueled speculation. Its reverse side displays a truncated pyramid topped with a radiant eye. This symbol closely resembles the all-seeing eye found in Masonic iconography. Official records from the Treasury Department state the design was finalized in the year 1935. They maintain its elements represent national strength and divine providence. Yet independent researchers have consistently pointed to the Masonic affiliations of several founding fathers. They argue the similarity is far from coincidental. Historical documents confirm that Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were prominent Freemasons. Franklin even served as the Grand Master of Pennsylvania. Their involvement in early American iconography is well documented. Washington, for instance, used Masonic rituals during the Capitol's cornerstone ceremony in the year 1793. However, attributing the $1 bill's design to a direct Masonic plot is problematic. The final design was approved by President Franklin Roosevelt and Secretary Henry Morgenthau. Neither man was a known member of the fraternity. The designer, Edward Simmons, also had no documented Masonic ties. This creates a significant evidential gap for conspiracy theories. Similar claims surround the street layout of Washington, D.C. Pierre L'Enfant's original plan features numerous triangles and pentagrams. Conspiracy theorists overlay these patterns to reveal hidden Masonic symbols. They cite L'Enfant's potential association with European lodges. Official accounts, however, describe a practical Baroque design focused on vistas and traffic flow. The actual construction was overseen by Andrew Ellicott, who modified L'Enfant's plan. While some Masons were involved in the project, the geometric patterns align with common 18th century urban planning principles. The true story appears to be one of aesthetic choice, not clandestine messaging. The documented influence of individual Masons is undeniable, but the evidence for a grand, hidden symbolic language on government property remains circumstantial at best. This historical focus on public perception has consequently shaped how Freemasonry now confronts its own internal identity. The Freemasonry community currently faces profound internal debates regarding modernization. Traditionalists advocate preserving centuries-old customs, while reformists push for adaptation to contemporary values. This ideological conflict centers on three critical issues: the admission of women, the updating of rituals, and the call for greater public transparency. According to official statements from various Grand Lodges, the core principles of the fraternity are deemed immutable. Arguments from the traditionalist faction are deeply rooted in historical precedent. They contend that admitting women fundamentally alters the fraternal character of the Brotherhood, an institution historically reserved for men. Similarly, they argue that modernizing rituals, some of which originated with medieval stonemasons, strips them of their symbolic power and esoteric meaning. Recent Grand Lodge decisions, such as the United Grand Lodge of England's reaffirmation of its male-only membership policy in 2019, illustrate this conservative stance. Membership survey data from the same year suggested that over 60% of long-standing members opposed any significant changes to tradition. Conversely, reformist factions point to declining membership numbers as a catalyst for change. Independent researchers have discovered that mixed-gender and female-only lodges are experiencing growth in several European countries. These groups have updated their rituals to be more inclusive and have adopted a policy of greater openness about their activities and charitable work. Declassified documents from some North American lodges show internal discussions from 2016 about the potential benefits of admitting women to reverse membership declines. However, facts indicate a deep schism. When the Grand Lodge of France voted to recognize female members in 2021, it prompted immediate suspension from other mainstream obediences. The true reason for resistance, analysts suggest, may lie in a fundamental conflict between historical identity and long-term survival. This resistance to change consequently raises deeper questions about how such secretive traditions originally formed. Historical records conclusively established the transformation of operative stonemasons guilds into speculative philosophical societies during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Documents like the Regius poem and official lodge minutes trace this evolution. However, the genesis of their core rituals remains one of the most profound enigmas. Scholars have long debated the exact origins of the symbolic degrees. Some authorities point to influences from medieval knighthood orders. Yet declassified archives from the early 18th century show significant discrepancies between regional practices. The true architects of these elaborate ceremonies and their initial purposes are still unknown. The political influence of these brotherhoods constitutes another enduring puzzle. Official narratives consistently downplay their role in state affairs, yet evidence suggests their involvement in pivotal events like the American Revolution. Freemasons counted founding fathers among their members. Independent researchers analyzing correspondence have uncovered coordinated efforts. But the full extent of this influence, particularly in European courts of the 19th century, remains deliberately obscured. The question persists: were they a philosophical force or a genuine political network operating in plain sight? In the digital age, these ancient societies face an unprecedented paradox. Their traditional reliance on secrecy and physical lodges clashes with global connectivity. How can initiation rituals requiring physical presence remain relevant? Some lodges have already adapted, utilizing encrypted communications for decades. The core purpose of moral and philosophical development endures, but the methods are transforming. The ultimate mystery is whether these digital transformations will dilute their essence or forge a new, more resilient form of fellowship for the 21st century. The answer is still being written. Our journey into the world of Freemasonry comes to an end. From the humble stone workers of Europe, their craft evolved into a complex brotherhood, marked by the emergence of the first Grand Lodge. Yet, this path was fraught with rival factions and schisms, even as architecture served as allegory for their hidden tenets. Initiation secrets revealed a world of symbolism, drawing the attention of monarchs against the craft and fueling revolutionary connections. The colonial spread and adaptation saw the brotherhood cross oceans, though schisms along national lines would eventually emerge. Their wartime survival strategies proved effective even amidst membership decline mysteries. Today, in the digital age adaptation, they navigate philanthropy versus secrecy, while New World Order allegations persist. Symbols in plain sight continue to intrigue, as traditionalism versus reform shapes their future, leaving enduring mysteries remain. Subscribe to our channel to not miss new episodes. Until next time.